Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Michael Kolbeck, and I was going to share with you a few thoughts today on something that I feel is like a huge detriment in Western society, at least if you are raised in a Christian religious uh, ideology. And that is the concept of original sin, right? So we're going to put the date up on here. You know, I like to do that. We're going to talk about original sin. Yeah, and the concept of original sin. What I find so interesting about is this is damn near impossible to back up scripturally. And yes, there are a few passages and things that can be pulled out that somebody can construe this out of. But actually, original sin was created by St. Augustine, as were a number of other theological perspectives that were actually very damaging to a person, to the human psyche, to the human condition in and of themselves. Many of the things that Augustine put forth creates this utter worthlessness, utter depravity of the human themselves, completely shame-based ideology coming from Augustine on a number of things. And let's face it, those things have a massive psychological development in a person. So whether or not you even teach your kid through taking them to church or whatever it was, um, whether they learn about original sin or not, the fact is that in Western civilization, everything is built under to a very large degree, uh, built under this collective consciousness around the theology of Christianity, not the teachings of Jesus, but the theology that has been developed and overlaid onto Christianity. Because Jesus never came to form a religion. In fact, Jesus spoke out against the Pharisees and Sadducees of the day, which were those people who held the chains of religion in terms of the Jewish belief system, right? And he came and he spoke out against them because Jesus was teaching direct connection to the divine, remembering who you are. You are the divine. You are spirit. You are God having a human experience. You are fully divine, fully God, right? A lot of people don't like that. A lot of people don't like that saying because it goes against this architectural, let's say, theology that is part of the collective consciousness of Western thought. And much of this theology was developed in around the same time as the Council of Nicaea and all of that stuff. Because before the Council of Nicaea, there was a lot of differences in terms of Christianity and what it meant to be a Christian. Lots and lots and lots of different beliefs around that. And then it became centralized and solidified. And over time, then more and more and more rules and things from a governmental perspective of the Roman Empire were put in place where it's like, okay, here's the standard for what Christianity is under the Roman Empire, right? And you're still free to believe your variations of Christianity. That's fine. That's the way it was at first. And then as time progressed, the noose got tighter and tighter and tighter until it was this is what is defined for Christianity. And if you believe anything else, you were basically, taken out. It became a very state-run religion. and not for the purposes of religion for themselves, for purposes of power and control, and progression of the state itself, i.e., the government itself, right? So, original sin here. Why does this bother me so much? Because, for one, um, my interpretation of sin, that what I was taught was that I was taught things such as you're born a sinner. You're inherently born a sinner. Okay, this came from Augustine back in the around somewhere in the 300s. I've got the date here in front of me, but it says late fourth or in the late fourth century, early fifth century. So late 300s, early 400s. What I was taught was you were born into the sin, right? Because of what Adam did, and this is what Augustine proposed and argued for, because of what Adam did, because of the sin of Adam and Eve, that now all humans are contaminated, that original sin exists, that you are born into the world and you are born with this original sin. And the crazy thing is that screwed me up for so much of my life, right? And then they added to it, I'm going to write this on here so I don't forget to mention it. Okay. It has psychologically profound impacts in the developmental psyche of an individual to be teaching them things like you're inherently born a sinner. By the way, there's no escape from this. The only escape from this is to do what God says. And again, this is mostly theology that is taught to us, not actual teachings of Jesus. It means confessing that you are a sinner and that Jesus has come to save you, and that God, in his all infinite love for you, has decided to sacrifice his only son to take your place on the cross. And as a kid listening to that over and over and over, I remember being just torn up in my heart and my spirit and everything, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm such a terrible person. Like, I caused all of this suffering and this death that Jesus had to go through, because it actually should have been me up there. And when you take and you internalize that, which is what you're going to do when you hear this over and over, this becomes part of your subconscious. Your subconscious, these beliefs in your subconscious then are then driving the filter through which you see the world and through the way that you interpret information in the world, how you interact with the world. It affects everything, right? And so it has very detrimental and damaging and psychological impacts on an individual, because you're starting off as an individual, you're starting off from a place that says you are worthless. Now, the church will come back and say, no, 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 don't you understand that you are so worthy that God sent his son to die for you, rather than having you be penalized and sacrificed like what should have really happened. This is what the church says, right? Instead, God, in his all lovingness of you, showing you how valuable you are, he, in his infinite love, sacrificed his own son for you. And it makes no sense. Number one, we're talking about a blood sacrifice. And blood sacrifices, how many prophets in the Old Testament were telling the Israelite people to stop with the blood sacrifices? God does not require blood sacrifices of that nature. And when you get into blood sacrifices, you're getting into dark magic as well. You're getting into black magic stuff as well. But that's aside the point. Sin, they will say, is this inherent thing. You can't escape it, right? You're being held accountable for something that is not even your fault. It is not your fault. The whole premise is original sin is based on what Adam and Eve did. And because they did something that God didn't like, right? Now everybody is screwed for it. And it doesn't matter what you do. And oh my God, I used to wrestle with this all the time, and it still irritates the shit out of me. that we're taught to look for our salvation out there. Well, the only way that you can correct what's in here, this mass of sin that you are born with internally that you can't get rid of unless you accept Jesus as your Savior and are washed in His blood. Um, you can tell I get about this a little bit, right? The only way that you can get through that is to accept Jesus and accept that cleansing into your life. In other words, you're looking out there. So in the first place, you didn't even do anything. You're just born into this sin. I'm just born as this tarnished thing already, right out of the gate. And then in order for me to rectify it, I have to understand, oh, God sent His Son on my behalf, right? So that I didn't have to be crucified and sacrificed. And so as long as I believe in Jesus' sacrifice for myself and confess in Him and all that stuff, then I'll be saved and my sin will be wiped away. None of that makes any sense. From a logical, reasoning mind, it doesn't make any sense. And yes, everything in life is not about logic and reason. But that part of your brain is there for a reason. So you're trying to remedy something that's not your fault, but you're being made so that it is your fault. And in order to remedy that, you have to look outside of yourself, right? You have to look outside of yourself over here to the sacrifice that God made through His Son, Jesus. And then you'll be deemed okay. The thing is, sin in and of itself means you just missed the mark. That's it. That is it. If you go back and you look at the Greek word that they translate to sin, it's missing the mark. It's being out of alignment. If this is a target, right, and your perfect version, your perfect highest version of self is right here in the center, then this is sin. This is sin. This is sin, right? All it means is that you're missing the mark in some capacity of your true alignment, of living in the true alignment and understanding of who you are. And the fact is that you are eternal, that you are of love, that you are from source, that you are of God, that you are divine, and yes, you're fully human. And this is why we miss the mark, because we're not operating in our complete spiritual nature. We're here as spiritual beings having a human experience. And that human experience involves learning, right? And why we learn, we miss the mark. That's it. I want to go back to this because this was a big turning point for me. Even after this, I struggled with it for a long time because I was raising a family and I just didn't have time to put into, really diving into it and learning it. But I remember when my baby girl was born, and this has been almost 25 years ago now. It was 24 years ago, right? I remember the first time I held her, this perfect little creature, and I'm just like, oh my God. And in that moment, I remember distinctly thinking, this whole original sin thing is a bunch of shit. You're trying to tell me that this perfect little baby who I just saw and witnessed my wife give birth to is already tarnished and is already requiring the blood sacrifice of Jesus. And if that doesn't happen, then this wonderful baby is going to be cast into hell at whatever point that she dies and will remain there for eternity. And by the way, the beliefs on hell, guess who came up with those? St. Augustine. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you're going to talk about the depravity of the human nature and that you're born into sin and you're going to create a construct, a theological construct like that, you're going to need something to go along with it, right? That says, that gives a person, okay, so what? I'm an original sinner. I'm full of sin. So, I mean, what? You're going to have a fear-based component built around it, right? And hell as well. When they use hell in the New Testament and stuff, the original word they talk about is Gehenna, and that was a city dump outside of Jerusalem. It stank, it smelled, there was rotting carcasses, there was rotting food, there was rotting whatever out there, right? And it's like having a sewer backup today. And the smell, the putrid smell of that, right? Gehenna got translated into hell and into this concept of hell. That's a whole other side story here. But the things I wanted to talk about on this is that this whole concept of original sin, when you're branded with this, even if you weren't raised specifically in the church as part of the collective consciousness of Western civilization, because Western civilization, from an architectural standpoint, a structural standpoint, is highly built up on beliefs around and instilled through Christianity and the theological overlays of Christianity that occurred, right? So whether you were taken to church or not, you're still getting the impact of all of this coming from the collective. But if you were taken to church and you're listening to this Sunday after Sunday after Sunday during your developmental years as a kid, it's completely screwed up. It is a complete disaster because it sets the individual up for always looking for something outside of them to complete them. You're always looking at the world as though you're never enough. You're not enough just as the way that you are. Nope, you're tainted right out of the gate, and it's up to you to correct that shit. Otherwise, it's your fault, and you didn't take the time to correct it, and so you get to go to hell forever. And God gets to stand back and be like, hey, not my problem. Really weird. Really weird. The reason why this irritates me so much is because it is shame-based and fear-based theology. Shame and fear on the map of consciousness in terms of emotive scales and scales of consciousness is way down here at the bottom. Shame and fear, right? I'm not even sure if you can see that on there, but you've got shame and fear. You've got the ultimate up here, which is love, unconditional love, which is God, which is oneness, which is what we are all from. Jesus says, I and the Father are one. You are in me and I am in you. If you know me, you know the Father. All of these things, Jesus is talking about oneness. He's talking about the law of one. He's talking about love, right? But you have a theology here around original sin and around hell, which is a side point, but they pair together, right? That are based on shame and fear. You see, the concept of original sin doesn't say, oh, you did something bad and correct it. Okay, everything's good now. You cleaned it up as best as you could, right? You cleaned up the mess you made, right? You altered where you were aiming. You altered your alignment. You aligned more to your truer nature of self and were therefore able to hit the target. No, the concept of original sin is very shame-based. So instead of just an act being an act that, gosh, I kind of missed the target on that. I need to correct that, which is really what it's about. Instead, original sin planted the concept of you inherently are bad, right? Not what you did in this moment or in this moment and in this moment. You come out of the chute when you're born and you're bad. That's it. And you require salvation right out of the gate. It is shame-based, and then they lace the hell theological construct over that, which ties fear and shame together in a very, very powerful way. And this then becomes the lens through which you see the world and through which you operate in the world, based on beliefs that you internalize and that become part of your subconscious. And then you see all of this stuff manifest in the world around you. I know this may strike a chord with some people, depending on who listens to this. But the truth is, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. The truth is, you are the Word, right? The vibration, that which came from non-material, non-physical, and you have become flesh. You have become matter. You have become physical, from non-physical to physical. You are the divine having a human experience, and that is a very powerful thing. And to get rid of this, it does take a lot of work. It takes a lot of shadow work. It takes a lot of going within and saying, what is driving me here? What are the fears that I have around this? And really doing the inner work to bring about your salvation in this regard, your salvation from these theological concepts that are extremely damning and very damaging to the psyche of an individual. And I will leave you with that for today. Blessings and love to each of you.